So I think we will start. Today we're having a discussion by Archaeology Matters, a Ukrainian perspective. And we today have, we were planning to have 4 speakers, but everything changed. And I think it changed for the good way. We have today 5 speakers, and they will represent different parts of Ukrainian archaeology, different institutions, different layers of society, if you can say so, different schools of Ukrainian archaeology, and we will see it really from the different perspective. Today we will have here Pavlo Shydlovskyi, the head of the Department of Archaeology and Museum Studies at the Shevchenko National University of Kyiv. We are having Oksana Lifantii, leading researcher from Treasury of the National Museum of History of Ukraine. We are having Serhii Telizhenko, scientific secretary of Institute of Archaeology of the National Sciences of Ukraine, and Alisa, Demina, senior lecturer, National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, and the 5th discussant speaker of today's our discussion is Grechko, civil military communication of General Staff of Armed Forces of Ukraine, and also the Doctor of Historical Sciences from the Institute of Archaeology of National Academy of Sciences. So today we will talk about how we see Ukrainian archaeology, what problems we see here, what's going on with Ukrainian archaeology right now, and we will try to show from our perspective, from our side to our international colleagues, what's going on and what we're doing with Ukrainian archaeology, what we're planning to do. We will touch different topics. Somebody will talk, of course, about war, because war changed everything and it's ongoing now, and it changed archaeology totally. But we will touch also other topics such as education and publication of the materials from the occupied territories and different other points. So I think we can start. And I'm giving the word to Pavlo Shydlovskyi.
Okay, thank you very much. I will not speak so quickly as Alexandra. Sorry for my English. First of all, the topic of our meeting here is a topic why archaeology matters, Ukrainian perspective. And as for me, and maybe for anybody else, archaeology matters that this science is destroying different irrational theories, different theories of conspiracy, different falsification of history in global sense. And it's a good tool for struggling against xenophobia, against totalitarianism, and for real science, and for forming in next generations, forming the scientific world outlook. And from Ukrainian perspective, from Ukrainian side, we can speak that archaeology is a great tool for destroying imperialistic narratives of Russia, of our enemy. For example, I can speak about the project of All Ukrainian Union of Archaeologists that named Stolen Legacy. Yes, Stolen Legacy, where archaeological finds that now are stored in Russian museums are just stolen from Ukraine, and you know exactly these objects were found on the territory of Ukraine in different times. So for us, archaeology is a good tool. It's a good tool for preserving our heritage, our legacy, and to show to the whole world what is Ukraine in terms of history, in terms of identity, and in terms of heritage. But now we speak that archaeology in Ukraine have a big problems, a huge amount of problems, because it's connected to, first of all, occupying of vast territories of our country, including Crimea, which is archaeological treasury of archaeological sites from Paleolithic time till medieval times. And we speak that a lot of scientists now are serving in armed forces of Ukraine, and a lot of scientists, a lot of archaeologists escape out from Ukraine to abroad to protecting their lives. And of course, there's a decreasing in number of scientific researchers and scientific research at all, decreasing in number of expeditions. And of course, it influences on our academic studies. But in the last times, in the last 3 years, we can observe some shift from direct academic studies, from real scientific studies to the studies connecting to the cultural preservation and heritage preservation studies. So many archaeologists and many museum workers now working in different programs, in different projects, which are connected with the different attempts to save and to monitor the state of archaeological heritage in Ukraine, of the one point of view, and to record the damage caused by Russian invaders to our archaeological sites. And of course, this work leads to some decreasing scientific results our work, but in another case, we spend our energy mostly to preserve and to defend our legacy here. We speak about the big questions which we face it up with this process. First of all, this question connected to the direct danger to lives and to health of the investigators, expeditions of people who are working in expedition, because such expeditions which worked in the Sumy region, in Kharkiv region, Kakhovka water resort, the Live region, they face direct danger to their lives and health. It's a first of all. But we speak about a much more question which arises in our science. First of all, in the second, we can speak about the problems of our legislation and problems of the system of heritage protection in Ukraine at all. Because you see, we're speaking about monitoring of archaeological sites, such vast territory, we speak that by our legislation, if object, element, or burial, or mount is not listed in state register of immovable monuments of Ukraine, in this case, it's not assumed as a site, as a monument of heritage. And that is why it arises a question that scientists who involved in the process of monitoring and recording the damage, they have to do simultaneously several things. They have not only to record the damage, but also to put this site, to create the monument protection documentary for this site. It's a huge work at last, but I know that in Ukraine, for the moment, there is no special certain organization which has such obligations to create site protection documentation at all. It's a problem of our legislation, and it can be solved in some perspective. Next, we can speak about the problems of monitoring itself, because we have a problem with access, because we have no access to a vast territories because they are occupied. And of course, the decreasing number of expeditions leads to that we have only possibility to access to occupied territories and the territories which hostilities goes on only through the distant methods of monitoring. So I know that Serhii worked on this side. He trying to monitor the Telegram channels and different other sources for understanding the scale of destructions in Lugansk and Donetsk regions by different remote methods, and so on. And we can speak that even in the de-occupied territories of Kyiv region, Chernihiv region, also we have problems of access to these sites because we see the whole territory of Ukraine is covered by the network of different military objects, of different dugouts, trenches, and other bigger military objects. And that is why, of course, there is no possibility to come to this territory and to see the scale of destruction. Plus, the next problem which we face at ARC today, it is, I think, it's one of the bigger problems. It's a lack of people. A lack of scientists, because as I said before, many of scientists are occurred abroad, many of scientists are serving in armed forces, and of course now there is a question because Ukraine has a vast territory and Ukraine has a lot of sites, and these sites are now damaged by not only direct hostilities, by not only direct bombing and direct fightings and so on, but also you see that mostly nice points of landscape for the moment are also serving as a military objects too, not only in the territory front line, but for all the territory of Ukraine at all, because many hill forts and many burial mounds are covered with different military objects, and the destruction of our heritage goes not only on the occupied territories and on territories where hostilities goes, but also in other regions which are quite calm for the moment. So I think that lack of people, it's one of the bigger problems, and in this case, this problem leads to another problem. It's a problem of archaeological education. I'm very proud that we have students, we have a lot of young people which want to be archaeologists here, and they studied in different higher education schools. But in fact, we have compared to European higher educational schools, we have a very small amount of educational programs all around Ukraine, because we have only one educational program for archaeological bachelors in Shevchenko National University of Kyiv, and only two master programs, educational programs for archaeologists, again in Shevchenko National University of Kyiv and in Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. And as for me, I think that we have big regions, and in these big regions we have big universities. But I think that we have to do more to teach young and to push them to cover this territory of Ukraine and to provide this monitoring activity which connected not only with monitoring of the state of the sites, but also to record the damage which was caused by war, by invaders. And this recording will be next step. It will be to assume this damage as a war crime against our heritage and against our legacy and our identity. So that is why I think that we need to solve these problems in terms of legislation, in terms of education, and in terms of creating different structures and different organizations which aim will be not only to look for disruptions, but also to create a site protection documentation. It's just the whole view of my opinion. Sorry, and I can't.
I think I have a very small question, and then we can pass it to Oksana, and we'll have a big discussion slot at the end. My very small question is, do you see, we talked about that war influenced in a very bad way Ukrainian archaeology, but do you see some good impulses for Ukrainian archaeology which the war gave? Of course, we have a lot of much more international communication now. Do you see something good which it could bring to us? Of course, we would better never have everything, all the projects we have, or everything. We would better change it for peace and not and having our people alive. But do you see something that it changed in Ukrainian archaeology?
Not one at all. Okay, good. Yes, you see, from one side, we have decreasing in number of research in archaeology, but from the other side, we can speak about that Ukrainian archaeology became more visual, more live, and many international organizations, many universities now trying to collaborate with the Ukrainian archaeologists, and it's a logical, because I can understand, because you see in international legislation, archaeological heritage assumed as a heritage not only of one country, not only of national heritage, but it assumed as a world heritage, and that is why when people abroad look for such level of destruction, they think that it is a whole human losses for all humanities at all, and that is why, of course, it's painful, because it's like a damage for nature, and for international legislation, we can speak that each country has an obligations to keep nature and archaeological heritage to transfer this for the next generation. And that is why, of course, many programs started, and of course, I think that it is positive, of course. And next positive effects, okay, again, I will speak about our students, because these students stay here. They trying to understand our archaeology, and they very highly motivated. I'm very thankful for these young people, because I think that it's our future. We need to transfer our knowledge to them, and I think that with the help of this next generation, we will change the situation in legislation, in education, and in recording of this damage.
I wanted to ask our audience, online audience, do you hear us well? See us well? Can someone react? Just to know that our recording is doing fine, and is anyone there?
Somebody's showing
One
there. Somebody's showing
knows that
there.
everything's fine.
Okay.
It's Tony, I can hear you.
Great, thank you.
So before starting my talk about the other theme, I also want to add something about being positive. As for me, this thing that it's very important, and that has happened to the Ukrainian archaeology after the invasion. It's shifting from the orientation of the post-Soviet and mostly Russian studies. Because in most cases, Ukrainian archaeologists published their works in Russian, and most of them are published in great scopus journals in mostly Moscow or other cities of Russian Federation. And it was convenient for them because they know the language and it gives the opportunity to defend your work, PhD. So. And it was probably the laziness for me, because to write something on the completely new language for me, it's hard. And it's easier to not think about what it costing to our archaeologists to stay in this fear of influence of Russian Federation. It was not reconsidered, unfortunately, before the full-scale invasion. Even after the occupation of Crimea, even after the starting of the war in 2014, it was not reconsidered among Ukrainian archaeology mostly, unfortunately. And only after the full-scale invasion, it was like the main question. As only because, for example, many journals, most of the Ukrainian journals, scientific journals, stopped to publish articles in Russian, at least. It was improvement, I think. So, and now I want to start my talk. It's dedicated to the theme of the occupied Crimea. So, there are several questions that I want to raise during this talk, and the name of the talk is Endangered Heritage in the Occupied Crimea.
Maybe we should change. I did.
So I need to ask, yes. Okay. Okay, so the main theme of my talk is dedicated to the huge problem of illicit excavation on the occupied territory, mostly in Crimea, because it's more the information about this territory is more on the public view, more than on other territories, for example, the Donetsk region or Lugansk region. And it's like much more in scale, it's bigger in scale than other territories. Next slide, please. Since 2014, illicit archaeological excavation thrived here in Crimea during all these years of occupation, starting from 2014. The same year, the expedition started to work there. Despite the second protocol of the Hague Convention for the protection of cultural property in the events of armed conflict. As of 2014, more than 900,000, or almost 1 million, items from the museum heritage museum register of Ukraine were stored in the museums and preserves in Crimea. And more than 2,000 archaeological monuments were in the state register, including this one site in the UNESCO World Heritage. But I should point out that 2,000 is not like all volume of the archaeological sites, because of what my colleague pointed out before, because of the problem of legislation, because of the problem of putting the sites in the register. So it was only 2,000 sites actually registered in 2014. Next slide, please. The amount of illicit finds could be counted in millions, actually millions. For example, only during 2 years of excavation in the territory close to the ancient city of the Taurik Chersonesus, in the buffer zone of these monuments, it's actually the only one monument in the UNESCO heritage list. More than 6 million artifacts were unearthed during 2 years. It's even less than 2 years. And this is information from so-called director of this occupied institution. And here you can see the pictures of the actual site of this newly established so-called New Chersonesus, this like recreation territory where they built several museums. One of the main museums here is the Museum of Crimea and Novorossiya. This is basically purely ideological projects that use archaeology as a tool to make the point that Crimea always been Russian, and this point is not only to the actual people who live in Crimea, not only to the Russian people, but also for all international community. The statement is the biggest project that was done in Crimea on the money and by the Russian government, and it was built actually by military forces. So it's basically ideological, the biggest one, ideological projects that were done for several years in Crimea. Next slide, please. Here are some but only very few amount of finds from illicit excavation from Ustelman and from TV3 necropolises. From TV3 or the third was actually excavated fully or during the building of railway road Kerch-Tavrida. It was fully excavated during 1 year in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. Also, here you can see a hoard of coins from Myrmikion, and you can see the first class objects, and there are many such information that are unfortunately gained in an illicit way. Only talking about the Hermitage, I would like to talk about this organization because of its director. The Hermitage organized the most significant expeditions operating illicitly in Crimea. They excavate ancient sites of Nymphian, Kolosnumen, Chersonesus, Theodosia, Myrmikion, Pantikapain, the medieval fortress of Chembalo in Balaclava, and many other objects. And unlike the object as Kerch-Tavrida railway road, these objects are not actually ruined in any way. They mostly excavated because they can. The next slide, please. The result of such works are published mainly in Russian scientific journals, but not only in Russian scientific journals, unfortunately. Some of them are still in Scopus lists. And I think that Scopus do not see the problem with this. However, some non-Russian-based journals also publish the result of this illicit excavation. This creates the problem of actual scientific acceptance of the occupation, which can be not tolerated by civilian society, as I see it. But unfortunately, this is like the bright example. This publication in Russian journal, and it provides the information of these front of three necropolises. The next slide, please. And this one from non-Russian, so-called non-Russian, it's based in Moldova, but it's published in Russian language. Stratum Plus. It has actual rules that they do not publish the objects that were looted at this origination, illicit origins. But as if you go to their site, you will see that they are published many articles devoted to the materials that were gained during illicit excavation in Crimea since the occupation. What do they do? How they deal with problems of Crimea in this situation? They basically put in the affiliation of the scientists only the word Crimea. They do not. They use the word Russian. But what they do, they name the in which organization it's work by the name of the organization that was illicitly created in Crimea by Russian government. So it basically acceptance of these materials as they are like so valuable that we need to publish them. The next one, please. And this is actually non-Russian language, non-Russian based journal. And here I point out not the publication of actual excavation, but the publication of non-invasive methods. And we can say that non-invasive methods, they do not ruin archaeological heritage. Maybe they could be published, but the same situation. You can see in the textbooks this article actual words that the loss of heritage that we would not record or something like that, or could not make surveillance on these sites, is the damage for the Russian history. They are talking about Crimea, and this is published. And also affiliation. The affiliation of the person who published it is also illicitly created in Crimea new organization. And you can see here the Russia. And like person from Russia working in Crimea during the years of occupation. And it's okay to publish, but there is only one case. There are many of them, unfortunately. Not so many as in Russia, but many of them. And this is a huge problem. Why this problem? Maybe we will discuss it later. The next slide, please. The other side of this politics, of Russian politics, as I see it. This organizing international scientific event in the occupied territory of Crimea. There happened several years, almost 10 years of occupation. There was the scientific conference where at least persons, archaeologists from different countries, they give their materials there. I don't know whether they visit Crimea or not. I'm not special agent. I investigated, but what I can confirm that they give the presence of their institutions and they legitimize such events in this way. Also, you can see here the picture of one of the Russian scientists who officially like to present himself as a scientist from France, if I'm not mistaken. It's occasionally he would affiliate himself with Russia or with France. It's where it's convenient. When he do projects in Crimea, occupied Crimea, he also presents himself as a French archaeologist. He also one of the leading person of one of the grants that were given by Russian Federation for investigation in Crimea. It's a huge project. I don't know the sum of money, but this information I found in the mega grants program, something like that. So this is the way of engaging archaeologists from different countries to cooperate with the Russian Federation in attempt to put this occupation in this acceptance of all the public. The next slide, please. Okay. The other side of the illegal action of Russia with Ukrainian heritage that also involve Crimea is the using this territory of occupied Crimea for the storage and base of the archaeological and museum finds that were captured from several museums of Kherson and put in several museums in Crimea. For example, in Central Museum of Tavrida, occupied of course, and probably from one of the museums is stored in the storage of Taurin Khersonesus, but this is not confirmed in the public. The next, please. In my opinion, all these actions are not random. Here are the words of the Hermitage director, Mikhail Petrovsky, who shamelessly endorsed Russia's grabs land in Ukraine, to which he refers as Russia's South. This is a very old phrase that we used for several centuries. Russia's South, not Ukraine, not separate country. And this is the phrase about Donbas region. In Donbas, we should do approximately the same as we do throughout Russia. And the SVO, meaning special military operation, will only be victorious if behind, in addition to the one who forged the projectiles, stands the one who is ready for the day after the victory. Next slide, please. And they do this, what he said. They provide this politics of exhibition abroad as a powerful cultural offensive. This is the word of Mikhail Petrovsky. And you can see some of the posters from such conference. They also do many in Russia, not only Hermitage. They do several exhibitions that devoted to Crimea as a part of Russian cultural sphere, and so on and so on. The next slide, please. Actions of Ukrainian institution in this sphere. Since 2022, the Ministry of Culture has been documenting the damages done to the cultural heritage of Ukraine as a result of Russian action. However, they mostly analyze the information only from the territory that controlled by Ukraine, mostly. In some cases, maybe with using satellite, at least for the last several years, but it was not put into public view. The next one, please. Before recent times, there was only scarce information gathered by the government organization on the occupied territory in public view. However, now we can see that such register really exists. Here, the register that curated by the special agency of Ukraine that are investigating terrorism, heritage damage, and trace of humans and trace of weapons. And they are actually recording who excavated in Crimea during the time of occupation and what archaeological items, museum items were transported in different places. They actually do this work, and this is a And to the end of my talk, I want to say a few words about the only one successful case of protecting exhibits from the capturing of Russia, because these 565 exhibits were actually the international exhibition in Netherlands. So this is the only reason why the Russian Federation could not capture them. These artifacts belong to the 4 occupied now museums of Crimea. And they were all these years, since 2014, in the Netherlands, why the lawsuit was proceeded. And as a result of this 9 years of the legislation battles, which Ukraine wins, on November, next slide, please. On November 27, 2023, the collection was brought to the Ukraine, and now is stored and kept in Treasury of the National Museum of History of Ukraine, where I work. And the next slide, please. Now most of these artifacts are shown and special exhibitions that are actually now is in the museum, so we can visit it and see it by yourself. It's called Treasures of Crimea Return. And now I ask just to do slideshow to show how the artifacts with some visualization from the exhibition, how these artifacts, some main objects look like. So it's basically a very interesting collection of ancient heritage and medieval, early medieval times from the territory of Crimea that illustrate more than 1,000 history of the territory of Crimea. And this is
I remember last year we met with you on the European Archaeological Association conference, and we were in one section. And I have a question after that section connected with your today's presentation. Not so much about Russian scientists, but about international scientists. Do you feel that there is some colonialism in international science regarding Ukraine, that international scientists know better how we should work with Russian, and if we should, how we should communicate with Russian scientists, how we should preserve our heritage, how we should work with it, how we should work during war? Do you feel that, and what do you think about that?
I think many scientists, not only archaeologists, was forced with this situation, and some of them even, as Yulia Buski wrote the articles about this so-called West-splaining situation, and it's unfortunately it's real. As for me, it's real. I saw it by myself, and this is a huge problem because we, as for me, not in all cases, but in many cases, are seen as children who do not know what to do with the real science, unfortunately. In many cases, Russian specialists are taught by the many members of European academia as better educated, as better scientists, basically. Some of them have very strong ties with Russia because of long years of cooperation. Some of them are actually Russians. For example, on this section on this conference that you mentioned, it's actually was one of the moderators that happened to be Russian. But when I give my applicant to this section, I actually don't know this because there was an affiliation of Switzerland. Austria. And the name of this person also do not point out to her Russian heritage. But she made a point during this action that she is actually Russian, and that the only question that she asked during all our talks, there was also colleagues from Ukraine who talk about the only question that this was interesting to her, and is there some ties with Russian scientists? Do we speak with them as Ukrainians? Do we see among them good people because they are suffering too, because they are oppressed in their countries? And I know this moderator talk about this, that she knows for sure that it's like a real situation. So basically, this is the one question that was interesting to her. As I said, it was like the question that should be raised in such events, because there was many representatives of different countries that I need in the view of Russian propaganda to hear this question all along. The Russians are suffering too, that this is the war of Putin. And when I was asked, I give the answer that many actual Russian archaeologists are working in Crimea, and they are liking to do this, and they're thinking that it's like they are right to do it. There was no response. So this is what I saw. Maybe somebody saw.
So we'll change this. Alisa.
What was about some of the audience are still in editorial boards of different Russian collection of pottery. The last one book, the Древности of Crimea, it has a lot of European archaeologists in the editorial board from France, even from Poland. Okay. Yeah, no, the last one. Yeah. So I would like voice somewhere. This is the one. I want to show the present my presentation, which I showed in Japan during my last visit there. So you can see the name of this presentation, and I will start. During the war, the Russia launched against Ukraine back in 2014 many archaeological heritage sites that were on the territory was destroyed as a result of the construction of fortifications or observation posts. You can see on the issue. At the same time, information appears periodically about discoveries, science, burial sites, and even works of ancient stone-carved art. Elements of material culture, which are an integral part of any archaeological heritage site, are mostly lost, since in wartime conditions during the construction of defensive structures, not everyone will pay attention to fragments of ceramics, flints, or bones. Some artifacts settle in private collection after becoming trophies. It's impossible to determine the number of such cases. However, today, the number of instances when military personnel or volunteers transfer discovered artifacts to museum institutions of Ukraine and the Institute of Archaeology has increased. The future is to link archaeological values moved from the battlefield to the places of their discovery. Without data on the place of discovery, and archaeological artifacts is simply a thing that has minimal value for societies. The archaeological finds of the Institute of Archaeology also contain several collections originating from destroyed archaeological heritage sites. The transfer of another collection discovered during the demining of territories is planned soon. The history of the origin of this collection deserves special attention. Science concerns not only archaeological values, but also people who, in particular, difficult condition, managed to record their location and transfer them for storage in a safe place. On this picture, you can see the Russian military certification in that region. In this picture, dates back to 2017, and made by our colleagues of Institute of Archaeology. So you can see two destroyed barrels. What inside? We, of course, it doesn't know, but we will know this place. We will check this place after. So next, please.
Und?
In order to clearly understand how Ukraine is losing its cultural heritage, which includes archaeological heritage, one must turn to the beginning of the Russian occupation in 2014. And if the annexation of Crimea took place almost bloodlessly, then in the eastern regions of Ukraine, in the Donetsk and Lugansk regions, fierce fighting took place from approximately July 2014 to February 2015. From 2015 to February 2022, there was a relative silence, which was broken by periodic military clashes that led to human losses on both sides, of course. The first evidence of the destruction of archaeological sites began to arrive in 2014. In 2015, the first information appeared from a Ukrainian soldier who while setting up an observation post on a mound, discovered a burial from the early Iron Age. Let's see the situation. Due to the fact that soldier had a historical education before the war and also had some experience in archaeological research, the burial wasn't completely destroyed. The servicemen did their best to preserve the information and later preserve the burial for future archaeologists. Like this burial not so far from Merovnica city in Donetsk region. Next, please. Here it's necessary to say about the peculiarities of military operation in the period between 2014 and 2022, and from 2022 to the present day. Until 2022, the Ukrainian and Russian military tried to occupy dominant heights in order to strategically control a much wider area. During this period of time, we have a very significant number of destroyed burial sites or guns. Since 2022, the situation has changed, as most sites began to use unmanned aerial vehicles, so-called kamikaze drones, in large numbers. Therefore, this period of the war is characterized by the fact that the military uses open areas of the terrain less and digs into the ground as much as possible. Next, please. What archaeological heritage sites are being destroyed as a result of hostilities? Absolutely all archaeological sites, burial mounds, earthen burial mounds, multi-layers, settlements, and hunting and from stone age, hillforts, and even copper mining and production centers of the Bronze Age are all around site. The mound embankments were used as observation posts and for the arrangement of strong points. Satellite images as well as videos taken from reconnaissance drones allow us to see the trenches that go through the mounds, as well as campaigners that are led into the mount. The mounds embankments were used to arrange the guards for command and special personnel. Next, please. how archaeological heritage sites destroyed. The most common destruction during the construction of defensive lines, trenches, ditches, capillaries, dugouts. Trenches now cover very large area of eastern part of Ukraine. And no one can say how much ecological heritage objects have been destroyed. I showed this map. I want to show this map because you can see the Russians trenches in Zlatova and Demina districts of Lugansk region. You can see this is a very long trenches, about 60 or more kilometers, sometimes in 2 rows. And you can see the situation on that pictures. The Russian fairly short time, starting in 2022, began to build defensive lines in the area parts of the occupied territories. Sometimes 2 or 3 defensive lines stretched in parallel. For it, the Russians used quite powerful submarine equipment. Next, please. This one is working. Yes. Of course, during the construction of such defense lines, no one cares about the ecological heritage that is in the ground. And today it's even difficult to imagine how much damage this caused not only to the Ukrainian ecological heritage, but also to nature. Next, please. Archaeological sites are also destroyed as a result of shelling. If it's more than shelling, then the depth of the conflict is insignificant. But even this is enough to disturb the upper layers of settlement or sites. As a result of the examination of the Zanyevsky one multi-layer settlements, this picture. Fluid post shells and fragments of animal bones were found in mortar craters. In craters from explosions of large caliber shells near the city of Toshkivka. This one, sorry, and the satellite image. Not only mountains were damaged, but also the advanced site of the late Mesolithic or Neolithic was accidentally discovered by me. This you can see the picture from my report of 2016. Next, please. Arrangement of minefields in the territory of the Lugansk region of eastern Ukraine took cases of use in the territory of multi-layered settlements as minefields were recorded. For accelerated demining of territories, the method of remote detonation or special equipment is used. Similarly, just could be damage. Wait a minute. It should also be added that during the detonation of Kakhovska hydroelectric plant power, then artifacts, you can see this, just artifacts from settlements and different sites that had been underwater for many years were washed away. Also, as a result of huge waves that was formed as a result of the detonation, the coastal parts of archaeological heritage sites were particularly destroyed. Next, please. Okay. The transfer of archaeological artifacts discovered in wartime conditions began after an archaeological mission organized by the Ukrainian Helsinki Union for Human Rights and the International Partnership of Human Rights, in which the Institute of Archaeology of the National Academy of Science of Ukraine played a major role. Typically, during the monitoring mission, artifacts were discovered at several multi-layered settlements. After the public coverage of the mission results, artifacts discovered during the construction of defensive structure in the Lugansk region were transferred to the Institute of Archaeology. With the beginning of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the number of materials transferred to museum institutions Ukraine, as well as to the scientific funds of the Institute of Archaeology, significantly increased. This was facilitated not only by the fact that archaeologists and museum and university employees were mobilized for the war, but also because the very fact of transferring the discovered artifact to the area was an event that was widely covered in the media and on social networks. Okay, if the limitation of time just show the pictures. This site was destroyed in Lugansk region, but our soldiers accidentally, for sure, collected all artifacts and sent them to Institute of Ecology. This is so-called Zubna culture settlement. Next, please. The Serhii Telizhenko also very often help to the Ukrainian museums and the Institute of Ecology. This is since he is found in near city of Pavlo. Next, please. The members of Chechen battalion of Sheikh Mansour also pass some artifacts to the Institute of Ecology. Next, please. This site was found near Slovyansk city during the making a fortification. Next, please. Our friend who went in the archaeological expedition to Institute of Ecology, Vitaly Tkach, also was found in the site of medieval time and late antique time near the Zaporozhye region. Next, please. See also the found of artifacts of Serhii Telizhenko. Next, please. Not only Institute of Ecology called the artifacts from the war zone, but also from different institutions. For example, from Dnipro Museum of Local Law and Rivne Dubno museums also hold some artifacts from the war. Next, please. Thank you very much for your attention.
Mhm.
Any questions or questions later?
Mhm.
While my presentation is being prepared, I just want to tell that even as a last speaker, I can say that even though this topic, almost last speaker, yes, even though the topic of war was not directly stated as the general theme of the discussion, but all the talks today were one way or another connected. Collections, so the collections, possibly excavations. But I think that even if there would be some probably scientific researchers in such things with this, the one way or another also could be connected to war. This just shows how important this is now to the whole reality, every aspect of our life. So, but my presentation today will be on quite different topic. Generally, it is about how archaeology can comment on the contemporary sites, mainly war memorials. Next slide. Let me try to do it myself. 1 second. I will try to do it myself. Oh, it's working. Great. So at the same time, this research question could be stated more generally as how can archaeological theory and method and interactions between people and material objects. But first, a few words about the history of this research, of my research, which is based on collaboration between our department and the Glasgow University, Center of Complex Archaeology of Glasgow University. And initially it has still has a broader scheme which could be described as how does war transforms the use and perception of space and objects, and it included wide variety of topics from train charts to belligerent landscapes. And in my opinion, the most important thing that we got initially from this collaboration was this outside perspective to look at things that became very quickly new normals. The usual things for us, for example, sandbag barricades or duct tape covering windows, as you see here. So these are very mundane things, but this outside perspective made us look at these things through the lenses of researcher. So why memorials? Well, I joined this project a little bit later after finishing my PhD, and I tried to narrow it down to the objects that were more or less familiar to me from my study of Stephen Kurgans. Another thing that played a role was the proximity to the objects of research. Let's say I work here at the Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, and every evening I walk from Kontraktova Square up to Mikhailivsky Square and then to Golden Gate. And you all probably know that on this route you can observe a number of memorials featuring objects destroyed in this war. To study them, as well as several others places in Kyiv region, with the kind help of Alexander Manchin and Oleg Belinsky, I used a couple of methodological frameworks, which may not be originated in archaeology, but are largely developed within archaeology. So it's spatial archaeology and cultural biographies of objects. Right now, I won't stop on that because we don't have enough time, so I won't describe in detail the methodology at each site. I hope soon there will be a paper published about this with more details, but today I will give my general impressions of the potential of this approach for archaeological studies and not only. So I will give just a few preliminary observations. So first thing that I observed is that, at least on this rather small sample of sites, was the difference between treatment and memorialization approach to military and civilian objects destroyed or damaged in war. So among sites featuring military equipment around Kyiv, we could see, first of all, some Russian weaponry. This is a classic example of spolia, war trophies. They are typically displayed in the central, visible parts of the city. And we can assume to symbolize victory, triumph, or something like this. There were a number of the damaged Ukrainian military vehicles. Lots of them are now used for fundraising purposes, and as they themselves serve as a real testament and a reminder of the daily struggles and sacrifices on lines, and the responsibility for everyone to contribute to these efforts. The thing that really helped Ukraine to withstand the first several months of the full-scale invasion. So one thing that is important is that despite the different intentions, all these types of objects, so the way they are displayed and treated is remarkably similar. None of these vehicles have been repaired, as destruction is the focal point of all the messages. They feature similar inscriptions, mostly political statements, name of peoples, name of settlements, and interesting that at some sites, for example, at Mikhailivsky Square, both Russian and Ukrainian vehicles even located side by side. So they are, of course, could say that this is different memorials, but still they are together and look pretty much the same. So I will return to this observation after discussing how damaged civilian objects are different and similar at the same time. So in case of civilian objects, and places, they rarely feature any political messaging and any statements like that. There's generally no place for the enemy on them. Then they rather portray the symbols of sadness, hope, loss, and rebirth. However, the traces of destruction are also not hidden, but instead reinterpreted to give these objects a new meaning. So one can still observe the traces of massive fire on the cars in Irpin's graveyard, and the flowers on wooden fences, which will be shown later, also do not conceal but emphasize the multiples. And another feature that is different is that they are much more bound to the places of these traumatic events. So if we are talking about civilian memorials, they are often located precisely on the place when something traumatic happened. So what we can say about this? The reason for their differing messaging, despite destruction being in the center of the representation, is that what can we now assume is that the weaponry was created for the wartime use. So their destruction during war is intrinsic to their creation, making their eventual fate accepted as inevitable. The same thing basically states the plate on the Alisa square of this veteran car memorial, which states that in war the car is expendable. So following this biographical approach, we can suggest that it's not their destruction itself that enabled some of these vehicles or weapons to become memorials. Instead, it was the change in context, particularly the spatial and functional context that transformed their meaning. So a burnt tank left on the battlefield is merely debris, but placed on the central square, it becomes a symbol. At the same time, unlike arms and weapons, civilian objects, they were created for peacetime use. So the violence and destruction that happened to civilian objects, they are not, they are not part of the intended purpose, but stay in the direct opposition to it. Therefore, the subsequent sacralization didn't arise from just the loss of their practical function, but rather from a traumatic event in their biography. Another interesting observation that I had regarding civilian sites and places of trauma, that a lot of those that we observed, like for example, this one under the Irpin Bridge, are in fact spontaneous memorials created through the grassroots actions. This, in my opinion, is one of the main strengths and values of conducting this study right now, during the ongoing war, before these places became part of the established political and historical narrative. So in archaeology, we usually deal with some complete sites and trying itself to reconstruct some processes behind their creation. Here we basically see the formation process in real time, and all of them are constantly evolving, changing, and some of them disappearing. But as well as people's motives for their creation and their perception by the public. This, of course, is the main difference between our usual archaeological studies, when we already don't have the voices of eyewitnesses, and you probably studying the present events. But this is also not something completely unusual, and generally this field of study exists, is called public archaeology. I won't stop right now with this again, just mention another thing, is that once again, crucial in the current timing is that as the material objects, people's perception of them at this stage remained genuine, authentic, and at times polarizing, such as, for example, drawing flowers on the damaged property or something like this. At least anecdotally, I know sparkled some negative responses. So such images could be seen as disrespectful to the dead and diminishing the gravity of the events. So it still has some discussion around it within the public, within the community. And it also needs to be acknowledged that this is important not only for the general, let's say, research or reconstruction of the narratives around the sites, but also to explore how these memorials in turn affect and play their role in the perception of this war and the trauma processing. Partly, methodological framework for this exists, for example, there are several studies of the therapeutic effects of spontaneous roadside accident memorials. They showed that such practices offer individuals a sense of closure and create space for belonging within the community that shares the same feeling. These memorials bring people together in grief and create become solidified emotion drama. At the same time, at least to my knowledge, there is no study that simultaneously explored the changing nature of memorials and the evolving memory about them, particularly in the context of war. And hopefully we could fill this gap in the future. I have chosen this quote from Mary Douglas's book, Purity in Danger, as an epigraph to this paper. I will read it probably. In painting such dark themes, pollution is necessary as the use of black in any fiction whatsoever. Therefore, we find corruption enshrined in sacred places and times. So I chose it because in this book, she discusses how societies embrace the negative aspects of life, such as pain, dirt, and death, through cult practices. By engaging, she states, by engaging with these objects, people find a way to regain control over their lives and act rationally, as the alternative is madness, which I find very relevant to our current events, our current memorialization, and the study. So thank you. That was the presentation, and we can switch to the discussion parts.
I think we can switch to the spontaneous speaker of our discussion. And we will answer the question why archaeology matters. Show the main question of our discussion.
In my opinion, we need to speak about the cultural heritage during the war with the participation of the military. Because I see that the civil and military protection of our reality is completely split from our our protection of cultural heritage within the civil military cooperation was founded only December of the previous year. We are in the very start of our work. We use from now the practices and the doctrines in this. But I need to tell you that the NATO countries never conduct the wars on the territory of the countries which in the alliance, and that's why we have to create new approaches to manage this problem and the problems when the war happens on our territory. Another thing that we can read about our main functions are the cooperation in the several directions. First of all, with the military units, first of all, with the combat units, second direction with the different state organizations, vendors of the Ukrainian power, and third direction is cooperation with different civil institutions, including scientific, state organization, non-government. And now I'm here. What we need to start the cooperation with military actors and civil actors. We need your information about monitoring of the destruction of archaeological sites, first of all, and maybe your participations in the training of specialists and the different other options. And I think that it will be a good start for our future cooperation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I already have one idea for you. I will discuss it with you after the discussion about the training. And now I wanted to ask all of our guests who are online, if you have some questions, you can put them in the chat and we will read them. But to start the discussion, I will put a question to everybody, and then I think we will have some more questions. My question is how Ukraine in the dialogue with international community cannot become an object of this dialogue, an object whom somebody is discussing, but a subject, an active subject of this dialogue. How should we do it? Because now it feels that we're moving in this direction, but we are still in many dialogues just an object of the discussion. It's just a question to everybody who wants to answer first.
So I think that the main way that we should use is the active participants in many processes, which is basically to try to be part of some projects. Maybe if you have the opportunity to establish some new projects, and it should involve not only Ukrainian specialists, but someone from the other countries. So the engagement with us will be more effective and prolonged. As for me, this human part is very important, because if you know the person for years and years and you have the cooperation with this person for at least a decade, you will perceive it as your duty to help it to this person to understand, to listen. And basically that is what Russian archaeologists, Russian specialists are now have, because they have this prolonged cooperation with many institutions. Basically, in my sphere, I specialized in Lithium archaeology. It's basically the only known specialist to the West academia was that specialized in Lithium studies, mostly on the Russians, because it is their sphere of interest. And this is our duty now, if we want to win this war, and not only by weapon, but also in mines. We should not be moderate in this. We should not be very passionate, unfortunately, because if you talk with passion, it's heard as if you are vulnerable, and if you are not thinking straight. We should be very cold-minded and constantly promoting our ideas. Because unlike Russia, in Ukraine, we don't have the cultural politic that actually support Ukrainian archaeology, that actually have some, at least some popularization of archaeology. We do not have none. We actually do not have sanctions against archaeologists who dig in Crimea. for most of the time. Only in this month, at the beginning of this month, this very interesting person, Mikhail Shydlovskyi, actually was sanctioned by Ukraine. Before that, it was not a problem for Ukraine. This since that he did and it's all is like the answer. And only when the society and small communities, as communities of archaeologists, constantly raise these questions, somebody can say why we should talk about it. Nobody is interested in it. As I see it, it's working. If you constantly talking about it, but in some, it's not maybe like very understandable way, but sometimes important for this process, person will hear you and maybe do something for better. And of course, as for me, it's like to try not only publicly talk about it, but you can have the opportunity to change something, to do it. And that means, as I said before, archaeologists now trying to organize themselves and to protect the archaeological heritage. It's in the way that is NATO doing. By the way, during the discussion at the European Union conference, Association of Archaeologists conference, I asked the question whether there are some mechanisms to work with such damage, with such big damage to our archaeological heritage, whether they will done these preparations, this like what the list, what to do, was it prepared after the Second World War, and actually probably no. And this is like a very ironical part of the problem, because since the Second World War there was many wars. Some of them about a decade, but most of this war was not situated in some cases they were, but till nowadays there was no like rules how to deal with such situation. And this is also, as for me, it's the biggest problem, because it's showing that the world, as like all the nation of the world, simply did not care, or archaeologists in this country did not care to prepare themselves and their countries for such situation, unfortunately. As a museum worker, I also should point out that the Ukrainian museums also weren't prepared for the full-scale invasion, unfortunately. And this is very sad situation, because in 2014, we have actual evidence what will happen with even not past this war situation. So as for me, we should like mobilize our actions and maybe be more united. So as I see it in our archaeological community and in the community of scientists, it's in many cases very toxic community. When you start to do something, many people start to try to stop you. Unfortunately, I don't know why, and maybe it's not only Ukrainian issue, I don't know. But this is in our situation is very big problem, because we have very powerful that are mobilized and united, and we should recognize this problem and deal with it. Okay, who is next?
Some words just see now in Ukraine became sorry for this word, but a polygon using different algorithms, different methods for monitoring and recording the damage for archaeological sites. And our experience is experience to be archaeologist in war, to be archaeologist in huge conflict, and to create some algorithms to save our heritage, archaeological heritage now today. And this experience would be very valuable for the future archaeologists, and not only in Ukraine, because we don't know what will be this world in future. But in fact, now different organizations, different state, non-government organizations, and so on, trying to use different methods, remote methods, satellite recording, and using different flying apparatuses for from geotextile to just covering the damaged territories for some buildings and so on. So we use different approaches, and now we are in the stage of unifying of this methods and algorithms. And I think that this experience will be very, very important for other countries.
To become a subject in this world, we need to have a strong common principal position in the battlefield, in the informational, cultural, and scientific fields too. That's all.
Well, I think the most important words you've already said, but I really agree that we need to be more present and active in the world. So both in being have more cooperations should do, but also being more accessible to the international community, which we are trying to do even with this event. Another thing is that I think in our research, maybe not all, but general, we need to acknowledge this imperialistic narratives and the position that Russia has, because a lot of this why Russians and Russia is seen as such valuable is because they are part of because they are a former empire. It still has its use. And I think obviously that a lot of European powers still have this remnants, police remnants, and see something with this empire roots as unfortunately more valuable just Ukraine. And this is that we should acknowledge and should challenge in our every occasion. That's.
Maybe some questions from the audience or some comments. Or some questions from our. Okay, then I have some more questions. I'll put the last question from myself. If there will be some more, we can answer that. I will ask everybody to answer, but very shortly, like for 1 minute.
There is one question.
Oh, okay. We are ready to listen to it.
It's not so much a question. It's a comment. I'm Tony Pollard from the University of Glasgow, and Ian and my students have had the pleasure of Alisa's company in Glasgow, educating us about the situation in Ukraine, and we're very excited by the project she's just given a very good summary of, and are here to support in any way we can. And I would just like to say that this short and limited audience event shows great promise. This would be a superb panel at any international conference. And I do think that you've all touched upon the point there that getting the message out about the situation in Ukraine among the archaeological community and wider is one of the main challenges here, at least as far as, and I feel hugely educated after this session. I mean, we've seen the way that the Russian Federation is using archaeology very much in the same way that the Nazis were using it in the 1930s to drive their own ideologies and to crush sense of national identity, among others. And I'm quite shocked, but not hugely surprised, to see the level of complicity among institutions, publishers, and individual academics. And for instance, I saw the name there on one of the slides. And personally, this fits with an increased sense of a jaundiced attitude towards academic publication, with one or two notable exceptions. And I think we need to start getting the word out about this. But Ian and I and Alisa have talked about issues like colonial archaeology and paternalism and that outside influence. And I think I can speak for Ian and indeed our students. I'm delighted to see some of our students here, in that what we would like to offer is a sense of solidarity and collaboration and help in any way we can. And if that includes providing elements of education through providing seminars and lectures online, so be it. Hopefully, Alisa's project will develop. We're developing grant applications at the moment. So I think this has been a really valuable experience, and I would like to see more of it, because I think our colleagues internationally would welcome this sort of exposure, and I would be happy to explore ways in which we could develop that collaboration. And all of the points about, we've got archaeology that's being disturbed and destroyed by the activities of war, including digging fortifications. We've got deliberate looting. We've got the perversion of the interpretation of those artifacts. And then the huge challenge when peace comes of putting those pieces back together. And I think there is definitely a sense in the room that those plans need to start to be put together now. So it's not a question. I suppose it's a little bit of a manifesto, but we are here to help in any way we can, and that's really all I've got to say. But well done, everyone. That was very moving and hugely informative.
Thank you so much. It's very nice to hear from you, and thanks for support and everything. Oksana wants to say something.
I actually, when you mentioned the sprinkler, I actually remembered that during study, what Russian do is it ideological way of interpretation of our history and archaeology. This is not my sphere of interest, but I pushed to do it because of the reasons of war and the losses of Ukraine. But when I try to pay attention to this problem of publication of illicitly gained in Crimea materials, I stopped in the situation that in some journals in Russia, in their this editorial board, there are many non-Russians representatives of academia. And I should point out that by their presence in these editorial boards for several journals that are in Scopus in Web of Science, if I'm not mistaken, they basically agrees with the situation when in these journals these materials are published as Russians. So when these materials that illicitly taken from Crimea or illicitly excavated stays in Crimea, but interpreted and published by Russians as a Russian heritage, if you are as like representative of academia are present in the editorial board of such journal, you are given your approval, because unfortunately there are many of such archaeologists. Unfortunately, I hope that if we talk about it more, it will be less a problem maybe in future. Maybe it will not be like too considered as not a problem by these people maybe.
So I wanted to offer the comment, so it's a impromptu question maybe, but also regarding the journals and the policies of journals. So on one hand, I know that a lot of journals has conferences and its policy not accepting Russian-related others. And personally, I also was unhappy that everywhere I was during the several years, I was banned with the respect and ethical support. But at the same time, for example, I recently, maybe you also saw the recent article in a very small British journal called Antiquity, a publication about Scythians, which featured half of the authors were Russian affiliated researchers. So I'm not talking about Russian sense. I'm talking about affiliation of St. Petersburg University, published in the Antiquity, and it is publication of late 2024. But I think the cherry on top of this publication was that was acknowledgement part, where they written that they are, yes, this whole project was funded by the Russian state something institutions, so by Academy of Sciences, something like this. Presidential fund of Russian Federation. So for me, it was something unspeakable. That okay, you can probably could draw some lines, but not making projects funded by Russian money and publish them in antiquity. So maybe I don't know something, but I don't think that there are any possible justification for this. So this was just, I don't know if anyone saw this, but in your opinion.
And add in few words that among European archaeology, among American archaeology, not all of these people are supporters of Ukraine. They just should accept that some of them support Russia. That's all.
So if we don't have any more questions, we don't. I will ask the last one. We have, okay.
So I'm curious if whether there has been any effort by the Russian community, science community, to generate any kind of collaboration in the preservation of Ukrainian archaeological sites. Yeah.
What's the answer?
Russian side has neglected all international humanitarian laws. That's all, not only the preservation of the cultural heritage.
How can we collaborate with scientists who serve the fascistic and Nazi state? It's a crime state, it's a state of terrorism. How can we collaborate? Collaborate with Adolf Hitler. And the second question, how can we believe for the results of their scientific work? How? Because we understand that their institutions like Hermitage absolutely serve the ideological machine of fascistic state. How can I use their sequencing datings of some other analysis made in St. Petersburg laboratories? They totally ideological. Even the head of Hermitage said that he is on the front line of cultural war of Russians and so on. So his institution totally ideologically served this system. I never working with archaeologists who serve this state. Sorry.
I want to add 2 points. First one is that what Russians do in Crimea, it's not only Russians, it's Ukrainians who stayed in Crimea and choose to cooperate with Russians. It's also important to point this out. They are showing what they do in Crimea as saving of this heritage, because in other way it will be destroyed, I don't know, by something, by other actions. And this is like the shield that they use to legitimate their actions. And they try to engage Ukrainian specialists. For example, before the full-scale invasion, several Ukrainian scientists take part in the conferences in the field in the conferences based in Crimea, unfortunately. Now probably they will not do this because they understand the problem. For that, there was no understanding of the problem. Also, one of the exhibition that I showed the poster of City and the Warriors of Siberia. It was a hugely ideological project. It was funded by BP, British Petroleum, and probably Gazprom. So it also was not a problem for the British Museum to display these artifacts originated from Crimea and from part of Siberia, Russian part of Siberia, as heritage of Siberian origin. It was from not to mention the old Ukraine of and this is 2017, several years before the invasion. So this is like the one point, and the second one I forgot. Maybe when I like remember it, I will talk about it again.
So I think we answered the question, and my last question is for everyone to answer just for 1 minute. After all our discussion using everything we talked about, why archaeology is important?
Because it's a part of our identity.
Makes a scientific world outlook for us, for people, for children, for students, against us, proud in the world of post-truth.
For me, the archaeology is basically the tool that are not positive or negative. It could be used in different ways, as we can see from the history. Nazi ideology used archaeology as a base of their understanding of German superiority. It was the main idea based on archaeological works, unfortunately. So archaeology could be used in eugenic studies when the people measured the skulls of other people. So the archaeology is very powerful tool. And unfortunately, most of the governors do not understand this. And in Russia, they understand this situation. That is why, as for me, they have like the leading position in the situation, in this battle of memories, you can call it in different ways. So if in Ukraine, this will be understandable to as many public as possible, maybe Ukraine will do more as a state for using this tool, very powerful tool of archaeology, to protect ourselves and to show the real situation, not imaginable histories that are make up in Russia.
Yeah, I agree with first speakers about archaeology's method, because this is how as a way to identity. So it's the archaeology, if we will talk about Ukraine archaeology, sorry, big, very cool. It's a global way, because Ukraine was a territory of cross-cultural contacts and a lot of different very important scientific projects would be organized this way.
Well, I agree with the previous speakers that archaeology is actually being used in the ideological struggle, for better or worse. It's just, in fact, the way how we will deal with it is completely up to us, whether we will just possibly ignore it or we will try to do something to counter, to balance this narrative. But another thing that's I think maybe more in the sphere of the science, I think archaeology has several very good features. One of them is that it has this absolutely very deep and big chronological scope of the amount of human types of human societies, interactions between general humanity. The scope of humanity is the biggest And while we in our everyday life, generally, the recent history gives a very small perspective of how our life, how humanity could be. Archaeology gives this much more broader perspective, which actually is being used by other scientists, anthropologists, and other studies that explore the origin of things and the diversity of things. So this is, I think, not the topic of war, but generally extremely important for ourselves to know how something originated, how structures originated, and how they developed, why something survived, why some fell, some disappeared. So this is one of those strengths. Another thing is that generally I try to present in my speech is that it's developed a lot of very powerful methods, tools. So while archaeology is very interdisciplinary in its nature, so for the whole of its history, the majority of breakthroughs in archaeology happened because it's directed with other sciences. So it took some methodological approaches from the natural sciences, from ethnography, from other fields of studies, and therefore developed further. At the same time, archaeology also has something to provide this perspective of how human objects, how human space, and the objects themselves within space, how they behave and influence the people. So this is also something unique and inherent to our study, which I think could be important for
Sorry again, I remembered what I want to say. This is actually one of the important questions that I wanted to raise during the discussion, because I work in the field of Scythian archaeology, but also there are many colleagues who work in antiquity, Greek archaeology, and so on, that are basically during the years of occupation were greatly excavated in Crimea. And basically what I want to point out is that Russian archaeologists and archaeologists who cooperate with them in Crimea have privilege to know about these things, have privilege to know about fully excavated necropolises, for example, on the full place, like 100% excavation. And before that, there was no knowledge about such sites. What we as Ukrainian archaeologists should do, whether we prolong ignoration of these materials, and it will be this situation when actually Russian archaeologists will possess more knowledge about the territory of Crimea, because basically they have more finds, they have more first-class finds from these years of occupation. And in our Ukrainian journals, I noticed that some of these materials were published. And they were published not like in this year we excavated Quran. No, they were published like this sword is originated from this grave that has such a number, and that's all, without pointing to the year of excavation. And this is basically like analysis of the materials. But it's a part of this acceptance, unfortunately. For example, other example, when the site, the works put them in the that actually the works that publishing materials from Crimea. For me, for myself, I decided if I need to point out something about new excavation in that are gained in illicit way, I will mention in text all the context and will not put these actual papers of Russians or Crimean archaeologists who cooperate with Russians in the bibliography. So they will not have higher indexes. This is my position. But I hope that maybe in the future, or maybe like in the nearest future, Ukrainian archaeologists will also agree on how to deal with this situation, because now we have just basically everybody on their own, And this is a problem, especially for the young specialists who do not know what to do. How ignore, for example, first-class finds, and you will be in the situation when you not more educated, you do not know the greatest finds from the last time, so maybe you are not competent. And this is basically a very big problem. Thank you.
So I think for the end, we need to tell thank you for everybody who joined us online and offline, and discussion that we need to have the same discussion for the inside of the Ukrainian archaeology, to discuss it inside, to have this unity, because this is a problem which everybody addressed today, and it's a great problem of Ukrainian archaeology. We are not united. We don't have one position to talk about things, to talk about war, to talk about heritage, to talk about Russians, and everything. And I think it's our work to do, because we are Ukrainian archaeology, and our work is to talk more outside of Ukraine and to talk inside of our community. And I believe that it's not our last event, Alisa, and we will continue, because a lot of topics we wanted to touch today. We want to talk about gender in archaeology, about women in archaeology, about colonialism, about everything, but not enough time. So I believe it will. And thank you everybody for joining us today.